Yeah, he says the power of land, on page 182, the power of land and resource owners has been much underestimated, as has the role of land and resource asset values and rents in relation to the overall circulation and accumulation of capital. This arena of activity counts for as much as 40% of economic activity in many of the advanced capitalist countries. Okay, well, I have no way of checking, and that leads me to another, what I think is a serious criticism of a scholarly book. He has no footnotes, and he doesn't have any references in this whole book. So nothing that he says is, and especially some of the things that concern quantities and that should be supported with the publication of some established institute that does measurements of these sorts. Meanwhile, we just get all of this stuff from judgments that he's of course entitled to make, to pretty specific claims presented as if they're all the same and do not need any backing up. Now, as far as I know, that's just a fundamental violation of a scholarly standard, and I don't get the impression that he's presenting this as a manifesto or something like that.
Well, actually, that was the one thing when I was reading the book that I kind of wondered is who is this book designed for? Because it doesn't seem like it's just designed for a casual person, but at the same time, like you're saying, it's not very academic at its root, really. So that is true, yeah.
Yeah, it is, but for a manifesto, I mean, it's useless. Nobody would read that. Yeah, I don't use now scholarly standards, but if you read this and you had to capture people who don't read political economy, or they just go, please, what the hell is this? Compared to the Communist Manifesto, there you have a piece of literature, of mobilizing literature of propaganda. So I can't really give him that even as the benefit of the doubt. I would say this is sort of a scholarly book. And all he has is, at the end, a list of 3 pages of bibliography and then a few websites, another page, that are the sources and further reading. So it's not even distinguished. Did you use that as a source, or is it just you pass this on to the reader generously as something we can now further read, having been stimulated by his work to no end? So I think it's just a very, very poor way of scholarship. Of course, it's a lot easier. I mean, the other thing if this guy was somehow, if he wrote stuff that was really well thought out and didn't need maybe a lot of backup, maybe. But it's not like that. It's not written well. It's not written clearly. Maybe it's a new genre but unfortunately, it's not a new genre. It's an old genre of a really bad book. I don't know. I have a few more places where I'd like to, I guess, point out, support my case that it is a really bad book, because it's pretty strong criticism, that I'm making. But I stand behind it because I think it's true. Here he talks about speed and place, which have been big topics in postmodernist theorizing, but also in the speeding up of everything. And I guess he has something to say too. Oh, before I forget, cyberspace is here. I looked in the index. Does he mention the internet? Does he mention the World Wide Web? Yes, he does. Once each. Does he have anything under communications? 0. Now, how can you write about the world today without taking communication systems seriously and include those into your analysis? And obviously the internet is a bit more important and than two short references somewhere in the text would suggest. And I think since we have read 2 really quite excellent books, the first 2, that were focusing on the communications revolution, but at the same time, those were excellent political economy works as well and analyses. Right? And those were Christian Fuchs' Internet and Society from 2009, Christian Fuchs, Fuchs, and then the other one was by Manuel Castells, Communication Power. Also, excellent piece, the first time that Castells actually came out and presented his own theory, which he always held back and never really put out. And what he puts out is very good. It's strong. If we compare those as works on the current situation, a big picture, they're miles ahead of this. I mean, this is really, it's miles behind, probably many, many years. And so he sees contradictions in their speed on the one hand, but on the other hand, we can only live so fast, and we have to move and we have to eat. And so he says you can contract to buy instantaneously on eBay, but it will still take a couple of days for UPS to deliver the product to your door. This last example signals a field of contradictions within the drive to create a world without spatial barriers. The current crisis can partially be constructed as a manifestation of a radical disjuncture in time-space configurations. Here, he at least gives the example from which he abstracts, which is you have to wait for your eBay because there's transport time still there, and now he turns it into this. I mean, please. The social order is riddled with problems of this kind. Raising a child in the city neighborhood occurs in a radically different time space from that defined by contemporary financial operations. This points to a long-existing but deep and abiding contradiction between the different time-space configurations that get constructed within and around the accumulation of capital. This is all just... Pardon? This was all on page 190. You reread that, and if you can, and you read it without any respect for it. You read it for what it is, and whether, and read it with a suspicion that he may be trying to pull the wool over your eyes, and what else do we have here of interest? Well, here's another one of a duh kind of moment, a very obvious thing. Regional, on page 196, regional configurations in divisions of labor and of production systems are, in short, made by the conjoining of economic and political forces rather than dictated by so-called natural advantages. Now, who ever thought that politics and other economic forces had nothing to do with regional divisions of labor? And you have to ask yourself that. Nobody would say that. Nobody would say, oh, it is just purely the result of Florida's warm climate that we have the orange industry there. Right? And never mind what the state did, or... No, nobody does that. Here's another one. State formation has been integral to capitalist development. But the details of this process escape easy analysis. Oh, it's good. To begin with, yeah. Well, thank you. God, we have his framework so we can catch the escaping bits of reality. Write this down. This is a law. We learned about laws of society here. 197. Okay. Bottom. The more capital accumulation can be captured within its borders, the richer the state becomes. Now, that is a deep insight. Because if it disappears, then, as it does in so many states, then the state is poor. Okay. Oh, here's a good one. Now we're in the chapter, what is to be done and who's going to do it. Now this is his revolutionary scheme that sits on top of his evolutionary theory of the 7 activity fields. Now, this, how do they always say, there's some, and when they warn you that you watch a show about plane crashes or something, be warned that there are scenes that...
explicit violence or something.
Yeah, language that is maybe difficult to take. But anyway, so on page 215 at the bottom, okay, take this apart for me. Crises are the irrational rationalizers of an irrational system.
Yeah, that's...
We could. I think it's a waste of time. We could take it apart, and see what logically actually this means. I don't know what it's supposed to convey, because nobody will think it through. It's just like, yeah, okay. But he had to write it down. He felt driven at the moment. Okay. On 223, it has long been a dream of many that an alternative to capitalist irrationality can be defined and rationally arrived at through the mobilization of human passions in the collective search for a better life for all. This is why he will never be the author of a communist manifesto or any manifesto. Because he's convoluted. Now this is stuff, an editor, if there had been one for this book, and I don't think there has been, would just say, okay, reformulate. Here on page 227. Okay, here he's wondering about where are there openings for actions towards serious systemic social change. And he says, while openings exist towards some alternative social order, no one really knows where or what it is. Okay. So they're there, but How does he know if no one really knows where or what they are? That's a bit too logical of me, huh? Well, we just assume they do exist. Probably they do, even if nobody really knows where and what it is. But just because there's no political force capable of articulating, let alone mounting such a program, this is no reason to hold back on outlining alternatives to the current system. So I guess what he's saying there is, even though it doesn't look like there's a chance in hell for any political movement or actor to really push for systemic change, I still want to have the right to think about how the new system would look like. I mean, that's what I make of that. And I think he's obviously wrong. That there are openings, certainly, and there are all kinds of people trying to work in them. But maybe they're not sufficiently aware of the fact that they really have to fight against the 3% growth imperative. If any other initiatives for change should work. Page 228. Yet the absolute necessities in the middle for a coherent anti-capitalist revolutionary movement must also be recognized. The fundamental aim of that movement has to be to assume social command over both the production and distribution of surpluses. Let's take another look at the theory of co-evolution laid out in Chapter 5. Can this form the basis for a co-revolutionary theory? A political movement can start anywhere, in labor processes, around mental conceptions, in the relation to nature and social relations, in the design of revolutionary technologies and organizational forms, out of daily life or through attempts to reform institutional and administrative structures. The trick is to keep the political movement moving from one sphere of activity to another in mutually reinforcing ways. This was how capitalism arose out of feudalism, and this is how something radically different, call it communism, socialism, or whatever, must arise out of capitalism. Previous attempts to create a communist or socialist alternative fatally failed to keep the dialectic between the different activity spheres in motion, and also failed to embrace the unpredictabilities and uncertainties in the dialectical movement between the spheres. Capitalism has survived precisely by keeping that dialectical movement going, and by embracing the inevitable tensions, including crises, that result. Well, there's the key factor here is the dialectical movement between the spheres that has to be kept moving, probably, but it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell what that means. Okay, on 229, there's more on the revolution, but the first rule for an anti-capitalist movement is never rely on the unfolding dynamics of one moment without carefully calibrating how relations with all the others are adapting and reverberating. That's the first rule for an anti-capitalist movement. I mean, a lot of that stuff is close to incomprehensible. Page 230 at the top. Secondly, transformations within each sphere will require a deep understanding of both the internal dynamics of, for example, institutional arrangements and technological change in relation to all the other spheres of action. Good, okay. I asked, in this book, has he contributed anything to understanding those dynamics, other than repeating that there are these dynamics and they're interrelated? No, I have not seen anything of that. Now, at the bottom of the same page, there have to be finally some loosely agreed upon common objectives, some general guiding norms, and they can be set down. Okay, Here they come. These are the goals that these might include: respect for nature, radical egalitarianism in social relations, institutional arrangements based in some sense of common interests, democratic administrative procedures, as opposed to the monetized shams that now exist, labor processes organized by the direct producers, okay, daily life as a free exploration of new kinds of social relations and living arrangements. Oh, I guess I'll leave my family. Explore a few things. Daily life is a free exploration of new kinds of social relations and living arrangements. Maybe I'll join a commune. That sounds a bit 60s, but okay, no, it's fine. I'm not saying that wouldn't be a goal, although I have a problem seeing a lot of people who otherwise wanted to see systemic change to be attracted by that one. Mental conceptions that focus on self-realization in service to others, in technological and organizational innovations oriented to the pursuit of the common good rather than the supporting them of that. These could be the co-revolutionary points around which social action could converge and rotate. Of course, this is utopian. I don't think it's utopian. I think it's just horribly vague and superficial. Then on 233, in the middle, he says, in the field of institutional arrangements, a wholly new conception of property, a common rather than private property rights, will be required to make radical egalitarianism work in a radically egalitarian way. And common forms of property rights are not new. A wholly new conception of property. I don't know what that would be. I mean, we know the basic form of property, and as they can be held. You know. I don't know if that, so I'm not sure what that means. I mean, aren't there going to be cooperatives a lot too in the system? That's not new. We have them already. There's probably going to be some public ownership, so like state ownership. There will also be some private property rights, for sure. But I don't know what this wholly new conception would entail. Well, I'm always glad when, as someone who comes from Germany, the importance of German philosophers is held up. And Harvey does this on page 234, where he says, towards the end, the struggle for radical egalitarianism also requires a reconceptualization of the relation to nature, such that nature is no longer viewed as, quote, one vast gasoline station, quote end, as the German philosopher Martin Heidegger complained in the 1950s. Was that such a great observation of Martin's? Martin Heidegger is known for his rather anti-scientific views and of opposition to modern technologies. He's also known as a Nazi. Is that right? Oh, yeah. Nazi professor. Really? And lover of Hannah Arendt. Oh, so now comes a question that why would a Marxist even pose that? Can shifts, on page 235, can shifts in mental conceptions change the world? On 237, he says, in the middle, we need new mental conceptions to understand the world. What might these be, and who will produce them? But further down in that paragraph on 237, he says, can't do it without going outside of the box of conventional thinking. Yes, he got that in too. Thinking outside of the box. One of my favorite metaphors. And he got that in there. For this to happen, For thinking outside the box of conventional thinking, this will require a revolution in thinking. In places as diverse as the universities, the media, and government, as well as within the financial institutions themselves. Karl Marx, while not in any way inclined to embrace philosophical idealism, also held that ideas are a material force in history. Mental conceptions constitute, after all, one of the 7 spheres in his general theory of co-revolutionary change. Oh, now it's Marx's theory. Huh. Very clever. First he presents it. Later he says, yeah, it's from Marx. Footnote in Capital. And now it's actually Marx's. Oh, okay. On page 239, we're getting to the end here. Huge effort is underway to put the big picture into some sort of copious frame, such that all can see it. But the current crop of academicians, intellectuals, and experts in the social sciences and humanities are by and large ill-equipped to undertake such a collective task. It's probably true. The current knowledge structure is clearly dysfunctional and equally clearly illegitimate. Well, that's not so clear. That's only against his very particular standards. But it's obviously also very functional in the capitalist system, the current knowledge structure. And to say that it's clearly illegitimate means that, nobody. But this is important for you. A youthful, student-led revolutionary movement is a necessary, alas, not a sufficient condition. But it's a necessary condition, so you guys are called upon. If you don't do it, it's not going to happen. That's what a necessary condition means. Well, I think he's right when he says, on page 241, the great betrayal of the intellectuals who became so complicitous with neoliberal politics from the 1980s onwards has first to be reversed. I think that's very true. This betrayal occurred, and in fact there were many former Marxists involved in that. I remember that in the 80s who decided, okay, it's enough of this Marxist stuff, this sounds good, and changed their politics. Oh yeah, this is the end. There's some important things, very briefly. So recent changes and crises had a huge social and environmental cost, he acknowledges, and says made much of by critics in recent years, as if they shouldn't have made so much of it. Right? And then, this is on page 249, but it is nevertheless possible to view accumulation by dispossession, or what Marx called primitive accumulation, as a necessary, though ugly state through which the social order had to go in order to arrive at a state where both capitalism and some alternative called socialism or communism might be possible. Marx, for one, placed little, if any, value on the social forms destroyed by original. So I guess that means all the subsistence peasants that are landless and flocking to the big cities, don't shed too many tears. That's historical progress. And I think that's what he's saying, and he's becoming more clear at the bottom of that page, 249. Revolutionary transformations cannot be accomplished without, at the very minimum, our changing our ideas, abandoning our cherished beliefs and prejudices, giving up various daily comforts and rights, submitting to some new daily regimen, changing our social and political roles, reassigning our rights, duties, and responsibilities, and altering our behaviors to better conform to collective needs and a common will. And he continues on page 250, it would also be comforting to think that all of this could be accomplished pacifically and voluntarily. but it would be disingenuous to imagine that no active struggle would be involved, including some degree of violence. Capitalism came into the world, as Marx once put it, bathed in blood and fire. Although it might be possible to do a better job of getting out from under it than getting into it, the odds are heavily against any purely pacific passage to the promised land. So get ready for some sacrifice in many respects and be ready to die for the revolution. But never forget, even in the middle of a fight, to raise the question of the compound growth with your co-fighters and people from other movements, because if you lose sight of the compound growth issue, you may be fighting in vain, because you will not have gotten out of the capitalist logic. If, as the alternative global, this is on page 259, towards the end, if, as the alternative globalization movement of the late 1990s declared, another world is possible, then why not also say another communism is possible? Well, don't you know why? I guess he doesn't know. He doesn't get it. He thinks he can just solve it with a clever little redefinition, because he says, who are communists? Communists are all those who work incessantly to produce a different future to that which capitalism portends. It can include a lot of people. So these are all communists. I don't know, I don't want to be ageist, because I'm at the age where I could be treated the same way, but this really seems antiquated.
Yeah.
In almost all respects.
Well, you know what's interesting is I think that most of his, besides the condition of post-modernity, I think that most of his books are recent. Like, I think he just started publishing a lot of like Marxist-inspired books in like the last decade or so. But you are right; it does seem to link to a lot of orthodox Marxism, which may be outdated. But yeah, I'm pretty sure most of his books are recent.
Didn't he write books before, or something completely different?
To be honest, I don't really know, but I think that. Yeah, I don't know. But I think that most of his books are like the last 10 years, aren't they? Do you guys know?
I'm not sure. Could be, though. Yeah, I mean, there is a... I hate to, be negative about someone who wants to be progressive, who uses Marxist-type categories, but this, I think, is counterproductive in a way. And it just, if this is all that Marxist analysis can do, bury it. This is, there's nothing here. There's nothing here but old, tired phrases, badly arranged, spread over way too many pages.
So would you say that the Stiglitz book is overall more strong than Harvey's?
I think it is, from a scholarly point of view, from a social science point of view, without putting your political preferences first. Yes, it is much, much better, because it has both interesting analyses that have some depth. He has institutional proposals that, even if they may at the moment not be embraced, they're not so far out there that one couldn't see them being embraced in 2 years. So that's in there. I don't know what, he has probably the ear of, or the eyes for reading of quite a few people who are much further on the right. So he may make a difference there. But on the on the downside, I mean, he does not address the political problem and the problem of class, poverty, capitalism, and corporations. And he, as you observed, he does not use the term neoliberalism except once, and then sort of and I've thought about that again, and I think what it means is that if you, anywhere around Washington, in a discussion, go on about neoliberal policies, you are immediately disqualified. You have immediately outed yourself as a critic beyond the pale. Right? Because only leftists use that in those policy circles. That's my hypothesis. But that's why he's not using it.
Yeah, I would actually correct on that.
Because he has no, he gives it a different name, but it's the same thing. So it's not like he doesn't believe it exists. Well, this was certainly interesting pairing, I thought. It would have been nice to have some, but there is a problem with Marxist analyses. If they're expressly Marxist, then they tend to be weighed down by Marxist conventions and concepts, and I think the best Marxists don't call it Marxist. They call themselves Marxists, but who continue in the tradition. And the tradition, I think things have moved on. It's not like we know a lot more, and it's not like that weakens Marx's analysis of capital, but there are quite a few things that are better understood. And a lot more empirical work has been done. Marx didn't do it. Engels did. Before he met Marx, he wrote something on the conditions of laborers in, I don't know if that was Manchester or where he was, but he went to the factories, he went to where the people lived, interviewed them and so on. But after, I didn't do that anymore. Which is why they missed some changes that actually occurred during their writing and lifetime. But I mean, that's another thing that is also there's a higher bar for that nowadays, in works of this kind. And you can't just claim things and say them and think that you get away with it. And you may get away with it, but it means you're not really top line kind of work.
Yeah. Well, I imagine you put this book together very quickly. Like the other book of his, Neo-Imperialism, that I read too, I got the same impression. It's like the Iraq War happened, he had to give a Marxist explanation, so he published a book really quick, and then, that's probably what happened here. It's almost like a small little industry. It's set up for publishing this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.